All right, well, welcome back to Health Made Easy. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Jones, and I'm super excited for not only my guest today, but our topic, which is going to be break free from emotional eating in 3 steps. And we have an expert, the expert on this topic, Miss Lety Algeri. I could give you an introduction to her, but she's going to do a much better job than I'm going to do. So, Lety, tell our listeners about who you are, your credentials, why this is so important to you, and then we will get into those 3 steps as fast as we can.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me. It's always such an honor to share a stage or a platform with someone else who's doing such amazing things in health. But like you said, my name is Lety Algeri. I am a holistic health coach. I'm a former teacher, a middle school teacher turned holistic health coach. And that was through some personal experiences that we had. I had decided to resign from teaching when my daughter was born. And right away, she had some health challenges. And unfortunately, we were a little bit tainted by the medical community. We really didn't get the support that we wanted. Now, let me just say there's incredible doctors and physicians out there, but for what we needed, we were just not being served where we needed to be. And so we started to look a little bit more holistically and look at alternatives to healing her. Long story short, we realized that food could heal you or can harm you. And at that point, I decided that there's so many people out there that need support, that needed help. There were moms with new babies like me. There were women with teenagers and hitting menopause that needed to learn how to eat and change their lifestyle. So I went back to school. I went to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and started my path on that. And what was so interesting is that I was a health coach. I knew exactly what to eat. I was eating super clean, and all I craved was sugar, and I was exhausted, and I was just emotionally eating all of the time, but I knew what to do. So it kind of made me realize, like, you can have all the information, but if you don't have those action steps to make it work, then that you need those habits and the action. And I started to figure out, like, well, why am I feeling this way when I'm eating so clean? And that's when I really uncovered that just because something's healthy doesn't mean it serves me and my body. And I started to identify, like, well, what serves me versus my neighbor or my friend? And how come they can eat that and feel good and I can't? And through lots of trial and error and lots of work with many of my clients, we really discovered that emotional eating was the root cause to many of the ups and the downs, of the sugar cravings, of the exhaustion, of the moodiness, of the unfocus, of all of those things. And when we started to dive into the why behind the emotional eating, it just changed everything for people.
Beautiful. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. So interesting. You graduated from IIN. I did as well. I think it was back in 2017 or something like that. So that's cool. Very, very cool. So I know the training that you've been through. So everybody who is not aware of that, it's very extensive. It's a long and heavy course load, but you come out with somebody who really knows how to coach you and get you where you actually want to go and has all the tools to be able to do it. So let's talk about this. Emotional eating. If you had to define it in terms of, so that our folks could simply and easily understand what emotional eating actually is, how would you define that?
So it's interesting because I think I would define it very differently than most other people. So I think people feel that you eat your emotions, right? So if you're feeling sad, you're eating because you're sad. If you're feeling stressed, you're eating because you're stressed. And I like to flip it around. I believe that emotional eating is eating because you're looking for an emotion that you don't have. So for example, if you're feeling sad, you're not eating because you're sad, you're eating and you're trying to find happiness in that food. So it's not the emotion that you're eating, it's the anti-emotion. It's what you're looking for.
Yeah, gotcha. So it kind of reminds me of when we think about addiction. It's like addiction is what the person is doing is not necessarily the addiction, but it's the fact that they're trying to get out of pain. And they're seeking something else. They're seeking a pleasure to offset whatever the deep-rooted real problem is. So I love how you approach that, more of a very cause-based as opposed to just like treating the symptoms, from there. So how prevalent, when you look at all the people that you've worked with over the years, for those who maybe are struggling with their weight, struggling with eating, struggling with just their emotions around food and why they're doing what they're doing, how prevalent is emotional eating?
So I don't want to say 100% because clearly I can't say that. But in my practice, most women, and I work mostly with women, most women that come through my door, it is an emotional eating situation. And maybe you guys listening could relate to this, that you've said, I know what to do. I just can't do it, right? Most women or clients that come to me, everyone knows kale's better than cookies, but somehow we're going to the cookies anyway, right? And so it's not so much about the knowledge piece of what is healthy and what isn't healthy. Although, of course, we all are individual and we have to understand what our body needs. But it's really about establishing those habits to be able to take that knowledge, the implementation piece, and make it part of your life. And for me, in my experience, the emotional eating, and emotional eating doesn't always have to be like, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm lonely. It could be, I'm stressed, I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed, right? It could be just everyday hustle and bustle life. That tends to guide what we're eating more than anything else.
Okay, gotcha. And then, so in terms of, as we look at the underlying roots and what drives the behavior, are there a top 2, 3, 5 things that are driving most people to do what we would consider emotional eating?
Definitely. And again, everybody's different. I don't want to blanket anybody because we all have our different, but I feel that overwhelm and stress are a big one. Because we're just so busy, we don't have a second to catch up. And then when we finally sit down on the couch at the end of the night to watch, scroll on your phone, watch TV, read a book, whatever it is you're doing, when you finally relax, that's when the emotional eating also comes in. And so that's a big piece. But for a lot of people, loneliness. Some people are looking to be in a relationship they may not be. They may be grieving the loss of somebody. Loneliness is a really big, plays a really big role as well, believe it or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're really nailing it with the variety of different things that are happening with people, because it all sort of comes full circle back into a stress situation, so, and you and I know that when stress goes up, so does, certain hormones in the body go up, other ones go down. And then unfortunately, as stress rises, it drives hunger, it drives, dysregulation in our blood sugar, which is going to make us, have this uncontrollable need or want to eat something. So we have this emotional piece, but then we're balancing it with this physiological piece, and there's just so many different things coming at us, and we're just like, oh my God, I just need to eat something, type of thing.
And just kind of to chime in on that, I think we're also looking to feel good, right? Our body's always looking for balance. So we're looking to feel good. Our body wants to protect us. And we can easily get a hit of dopamine with some sugar. And that will give us a quick feel good. It's not going to last. It's not going to be sustainable, but it is a quick fix, kind of like the addiction you were talking about before.
Yeah. Because I don't know about you, but I've never been in a state where I'm like, man, I know I don't need to eat, but then I got to have something. And I don't say, well, man, this piece of white chicken breast would really satisfy me right at this point. It's almost always something like carby, salty, sugary, or a combination of the two. But it's also very short term. You know what I mean? It's like the fix is very short term, and it just doesn't last. And I end up maybe eating too much.
Yeah, of course. And it's called comfort food for a reason. Right? Like the mac and cheese, the carbs, like you said, the sugar, those are considered comfort foods. And it's funny that that's what we call them. But they don't, are 100% right.
No, it's short-term comfort and then a lot of pain afterwards, especially if you do too many of them. So you've got 3 steps to break emotional eating, and I want to break them down. And let's start with number one. What do you think is the number one thing? And then we'll go through 2 and 3.
Perfect. Do you mind if I rewind a little bit before we jump into that?
Please do.
Okay, because I just want to paint a different picture for just a second, and then we'll jump into the 3 steps.
Let's do it.
So many women and men, but many women feel that the way to successful eating, and whether it's for a health reason or weight loss or whatever that looks like for them, is on a diet.
Right.
And so they tend to say, okay, I'm sick of the way I feel, I'm sick of the way I look, I'm going on a diet. And that means whatever. There's a million diets out there. We all know it's like $1 billion industry. And they pick something, they're restricting from the food that they love. They're probably eating less calories than they should. So now they're hungry. Now they're cranky. Now they're going to be like so strict for the whole week, maybe 2 weeks. All of a sudden the weekend comes, their friends are going out for dinner, or they want to drink. They eat, they indulge, they want a cheat day. And then they're like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. And then they feel like a failure. And so there's a cycle that starts at the top of like, I'm going to do really well. I'm going to restrict myself. I'm going to go on a diet. And then you feel really good. And then you start to feel, oh, I don't love this so much. I can't eat what I like. I'm hungry. Then there's that cheat meal. And all that cheat meal does is make them feel like, I can't do this. See, I just proved to myself that I can't diet. I can't do this. And rather than that cheat meal feeling good, might feel good for a few minutes, it brings them further down.
Yeah.
And that just leads to another cheat meal and another cheat meal. And then they feel, oh, this is it. I feel disgusted. I'm going back on a diet. And then they're back on, and it's just a continuous cycle. So the emotional eating piece is a big piece of driving that cycle. So if I can give anybody advice, do not diet. Stop restricting from the foods that you love. Stop restricting your calories, and let's just find a more balanced way to eat. And
yeah.
Right, because that needs to be said before we can dive into anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so you agree. You're with me.
100%.
All right, good. So now get rid of your diets. Let's figure out, let's just try to eat really good, healthy, nutritious foods and not count calories and fat. And let's take a look at that emotional eating piece. I like to say that we freeze emotional eating, and we freeze it with ICE. ICE. And those are our 3 steps. We're freezing it with ice, right? So the first one is to identify that you are having an emotional eating. Sometimes we don't even realize. We go through our days, and then all of a sudden, if we look back, we're like, huh, funny, 9 o'clock every night, I sit on the couch and eat a bag of chips. Or interesting, at 2 p.m. every day after our board meeting, I go to the vending machine and get some junk. So there are patterns that you can identify. But then you need a few minutes to kind of sit and think about it. Are you around the same people when you're emotionally eating? Is it in the same location? Is it the same time? Is it the same food? Like, identify what those patterns are. So that's step 1, right? Keep going, or you have questions?
Oh, no, I'm good. No, you're right.
Okay, good. So now you identify it. So for example, I had a client who noticed that every day at 2 o'clock, she was shoving her face with chocolate, candy, vending machine stuff, anything she could. Well, she realized that a lot of what was happening was that she was undervalued and disrespected at work. And so she started to eat her emotions looking for that comfort, right?
Yeah.
So then we look at step 2, the C in ICE, get curious. And the curiosity is, what emotion are you actually looking for? Like I mentioned earlier, right? So for her, her name is Laura. For Laura, the emotion she was looking for was to feel heard, to feel valued, right?
Yeah.
That's what she wanted. And she was eating those emotions, looking for that. So when you become curious about what it is that you're looking for, and we can use stress as an example to make this example even easier, because she was stressed out at work. We then ask ourselves, well, what can I do what's the opposite of stress? Calm. So if she was feeling stressed and undervalued, she wants calm and respect. So that's where we go into the C. That's where we go into the E, which is the execute piece, right? So number 1, we identified the I, we identified what are the patterns? When is this happening? C, we got curious. What is the emotion I'm actually looking for? What am I eating for, right? The emotion at the bottom of that bowl. What is it that I'm looking for? And the E is let's execute that. So if I'm looking for calm, what can I do to feel calm? Maybe I can leave my desk and go for a walk. Maybe I could take 5 deep breaths. Maybe I can put on music. Maybe, and make a list, but like, don't think about it in the emotional eating piece. We have to this needs to be done ahead of time.
Oh yeah.
Let me make a list of everything that gives me calm. So when I'm feeling that I want to go to the candy bowl, I'm going to rip out my list, whether it's on my phone or on my desk, and say, okay, what do I have time to do out of these 10 items that I've mentioned? What can I do right now?
Yeah.
And you'll find that the eating will be secondary. You won't even really need it at that point,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I really do. I love the ICE. That makes it so simple. I love the identify, because as I think about that, what I'm hearing you say is you're basically taking that person and you're getting them out of autopilot, and you're increasing their awareness. And as they increase their awareness, then they're like, okay, now I can really look at this objectively and start making some like logical decisions as opposed to making an emotional decision,
Right.
and then when they go into curious, it's like, okay, well, what emotion am I trying to make better or create, in terms of that. And one question I have is, so if they're stressed and they're going for calm, and let's say they don't feel validated, they don't feel like they're heard. My question is, okay, well, what's underneath that? Like what is the thing? And I know you do this when you coach people, because this is, it's a short podcast. We can't cover everything.
Yeah.
But I would encourage our listeners to think in those terms of, why do I feel like I need validation? Like, why do I feel like I need this thing? Do I feel like I'm not enough? Am I not prepared? Am I not, whatever that may well be? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, I have like 5 hours of thoughts on that. But I couldn't agree with you more. And you're right. We're just touching the surface.
Yeah.
But I'll give you an example. I had a client who came to me who would lose all the weight and then sabotage, and lose all the weight, put it back on. And we were like, what is this pattern? And believe it or not, we went back to her childhood. And I know this sounds crazy because you think, well, you're a health coach, but as a holistic health coach, we're looking at you holistically in everything that takes place. So when we went back to her childhood, we realized like if she got an A, her family was like, well, why not an A plus? She cleaned her room. It was like, well, why didn't you clean out the closet? So her parents loved and were trying to support her, but she took it in as like, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. No matter what I do, it's never enough. And that showed up in many, many avenues and paths in her life without her realizing. And when we realized that, she was like, oh my gosh. And we were able to put her on a plan. She lost all the weight and she kept it off, because now we started to build her up and she started to feel valued and important and worth it, where she didn't feel that she deserved in the past. So I couldn't agree with you more. But of course, that is not, it just so happened with this client that we figured it out super quickly. But sometimes there's some layers to peel back that we need to get to the bottom of, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very valid thing, because I think the sooner we realize that we do not need external validation, and then when we were like, I am enough, I am right where I need to be, everything is happening for me, not to me.
Yeah.
That we can really make a shift, in that curious piece, and it gets you to, what is always your ultimate outcome as a health coach, which is long-term results and long-term, happy people doing it. Now the execute piece, I love the execute piece, because I'm just, action cures a lot of problems. You know what I mean? But if we don't cure the why behind the what's become like a to-do list, unfortunately, sometimes, So I love the holistic approach. I love the 3 steps, because it's just like the fewer steps we can have, the better it's going to be, because like oftentimes that's just like super, super overwhelming, from there. Well, let me ask you this, because, if you had to say, I think you might have touched on this earlier, but maybe expand on it a little bit.
Sure.
If you had to say to our listeners, what is like the one step? Like if they could do one thing to start this process, for themselves. Because ultimately, if you're really struggling and you've been struggling for a long time, I'm just going to come out and say it, you need a coach. Pros have coaches. People who get paid bazillions of dollars, they have coaches. And the reason that they are so successful is because they have a coach all the time. Okay. So if you're out there, you're struggling for a long time, you need a coach. But for today, what's the one thing that most people should probably start with to get the healing going on?
Yeah. So it's so hard to, I mean, it's not so hard to come up with one thing, but I want to just bring it in. One of the things we're talking about, feeling valued and feeling important, and that when you believe in yourself and you have that sense of belief and value, you will automatically do more for your health because you feel that you deserve it. So one of the things I work with my clients is creating a sparkle list. And the sparkle list is literally like, what things bring you joy that you can do in like under 2 minutes. I don't mean go on vacation. I mean like light a candle, look out the window and stare at the birds, go for a quick walk, pick up the phone and call a friend, like drink a cup of coffee. Now, I mean, we can get whether it's healthy or not, but the act of having a cup of tea or coffee. So what are some things that you can do for you that will help you start to feel like, wow, look at me, like I'm actually doing for me. And when you do, it starts to lift that confidence and self-esteem and the thought of like, I am enough and I deserve good health.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So I want to go in a different direction with this, because this is something that I noticed in my own life is I was a natural like people pleaser. But I was also very much a natural mediator, meaning like if there was any kind of conflict, I'd step into the middle because I didn't want a conflict because conflict made my stress go up. So I wanted to make everything okay. And the problem with that is that everything ended up being okay except for this guy right here. And I took it all on to be able to do that. But then once I figured that out and started to step back from it, it kind of leads me to my question, which is you mentioned something very much sort of on my heart for people, which is the overwhelm for folks. So when you start to coach somebody out of the overwhelmed stage, because I think most people, quite frankly, they overschedule themselves. They do way more things than they should do. They do a lot of things to keep themselves really busy, but they're not productive in their work life and in their personal life. So what are some things that you do to help move somebody out of that overwhelmed stage so it actually frees the time up, not only like real time, but like emotional stress off of them as well, to be able to actually feel like they have the time to do what you're recommending them to do?
I think that's such an awesome question because it's such a huge problem for people. And there's two parts to it. And I typically find that there are two parts to everything. There's the emotional piece and then the action piece, right? And we talked about that throughout our time together. So first, people believe, you become what you believe. And if you believe that you're stressed and you believe that you're overwhelmed and you believe that you don't have time, all those things are going to be true. And what happens is then we tend to focus on like, oh my gosh, look, I'm running late again. Oh my gosh, look. And we focus on all the negative and all the things rather than focus on, if I believed that I was efficient and fast and like on top of things, I would notice that I did 7 things before 7 o'clock in the morning, not that it was 7:05 when I walked out the door instead of 7. And I would focus on that. So that's going to start to shift my thoughts about myself, that I am organized, I am efficient, I am on top of it, I am, right? Does that make sense? The emotional piece. And then from a habit piece, there are so many simple things that I do with my clients that get them to be organized in no time. Like I teach them a specific strategy to plan out their meals for the week with food shopping lists in under 15 minutes. Bam, they do that, the whole week falls into place, right? Different things of how to organize from a food perspective, I'm speaking, how to organize a refrigerator for things to be quick, how to make dinner and clean up in no time. So there are legitimate ways and habits to create time.
Yeah.
And then there's the thought that we have the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree totally. Because I think when we try to manage time, well, you can't manage time. You know, time is time. We all have the same amount of, you know, time in a week, same hours, all of that type stuff. It's just a matter of how do we do it. And sometimes the way that I was able to take back more of a control of the schedule was, one, living off of a calendar. And then I would put my stuff on the calendar first. So my vacations, my time off. When am I going to do my workouts? You know, when am I going to do this? When am I going to do that? And then everything else goes in and around that. And all I really had to do was not violate my calendar. So I just had one thing. Just don't violate the calendar. And I know everybody is not necessarily wired that way, but that took so much pressure off of me and so much stress off of me, that I told somebody this yesterday, and I call it like the rock principle. It's just like, I'm the rock, you know, like this. Okay.
Yeah.
Water flows around the rock. You know, I don't move. My thing is my thing. My schedule is my schedule. And then you just move around. You move around me. I don't move around you. You know, and I know not everybody can do that because they don't run their own business. They're an employee or whatever, but there are elements of that they can do. And it's like, what can you control? And just focus there. And the things that are out of your control, we just do the best you can with it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, I'm sure you've heard, like, show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities, right? What are you prioritizing is what makes on the calendar. And to go along with the rock concept, to kind of wrap this up too, is I grab like a bottle of water and I fill in like an empty jar, like a glass, big rocks.
Yes.
And those big rocks are the non-negotiables. And it may be work, like maybe that is a big rock. You have to go to work, right? Yep. And then what else? Maybe it is working out, or maybe it is eating healthy, or whatever those rocks are. And then if you fill in with little pebbles, those little errands, the to-dos, this and that, and then there's still room for sand. And the sand fills in around all of those holes. If you could just picture the rocks with the little pebbles. And so you will always find time to get those little things done. But if you put the sand and the gravel in first, you'll never fit those big rocks in. Those priorities will never fit into your jar. And so I couldn't agree with you more. And half of those little things that are keeping us overwhelmed are not important. They're, like you said, they're busy, not productive things that are moving you forward every single day.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of those little things are things that, quite frankly, somebody else could do for you. You know, and many of the people I know that you work with, you know, your corporate folks and things like that, you know, they're busting their butt all day. They're getting up early, they're going to the gym, they're taking their kids to soccer, they're doing this, they're doing that, and then they're coming home, and these are folks who certainly can afford to do it, and they're cleaning the house, and they're making all their meals, and they're doing this, and they're doing all that sort of stuff. I'm like, you could hire somebody to do that, you know?
And I just need
able
to chime in and say, like, even if it's not a financial thing, I have 2 children and a husband, right?
Yeah.
And so I work from home, I'm more flexible. I was packing everyone's lunches, making everyone's breakfast. In the morning, I like to work out. I had no time.
Yeah.
And I literally was like, guess what? You guys are packing half of your lunch at night. Like, let's organize. I need help. And now I freed up half an hour in the morning for me, which is a perfect amount of time. So the time is there. You just need to restructure it a little bit, you know?
Agreed. I love that. I love that so much. Let me ask you this as we wrap up, because many of our folks are listening to this and they're resonating massively with it. So how do people get in contact with you? What's the best way for them to not only find out more about what you do, how you do it, but especially for those folks who are listening that are like, I need a coach, and Lety sounds like my perfect coach. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would love that. I'm always, it's like my passion in life to help people be better versions of themselves. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You could find me on my website, which is LetyAlgeri.com. Or you could find me on social. I'm on Facebook at Lety Algeri 1, and on Instagram, Lety_Algeri. So those are great places. I have a free community on Facebook, a great Facebook group that is thriving. It's called actually Thrive with Lety. And we do videos and trainings, and there's great recipes, and all the mindset shifts that you need could be found there as well.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, you guys definitely get on that group and start learning, and then reach out to Leti and let her help you. We all would love to believe that we can just do it all ourselves, but quite frankly, some of the biggest jumps I've ever taken in the shortest amount of time was when I had a coach, or have a coach who is walking me through, because they see all the blind spots that you cannot see. And they help you navigate, and they help you do what I call time traveling, where you get to skip so many errors and so many problems and so much, pain and suffering. You just get to leapfrog all that because they can navigate you through the forest. So, Leti, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been really enlightening for me. I love the simplicity of your approach, and I know our folks do too. And I just honor you for what you're doing, because I think this is such a needed thing. But at the same time, those pieces are just not being done. And I love how you are just sort of like getting rid of the diet mentality and really going for like the root cause of serving and helping humanity and your people. And I just love it. Thank you for not only just what you're doing, but just who you are and how you're doing it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure. And I hope that everyone has been inspired to do one little thing for their health today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys get out there and do that one thing. All right. This is Dr. Jason Jones signing off. We'll see you guys on the next podcast. Dr. Leti, thank you so much. Looking forward to hopefully having you on again.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yep. See you guys later. Bye-bye.